Okay, subject that I want to speak about today has to do with something that I wrote about 10 years ago, and I got a comment on it, and I want to address it, which is the influence of Kabbalah in Morocco in the Halacha and in the Halacha of Morocco. And believe it or not, there are many, many things that we do that we don't even realize have to do with the influence of Kabbalah on the Halacha. And I will mention to you what I wrote and what the criticism is, which I think is justified, and what I think is what I think the solution is and the path, and the and how did the influence of Kabbalah work in Morocco as opposed to other countries? Because there are many halachot that will notice that Minhag Morocco is not like Edut HaMizrach, and many of them are rooted in this question: how much of influence in Kabbalah there is, which led me to a conclusion. This is written in Magen Avot, Chelek Yoredea, which was actually written in Los Angeles, believe it or not. In 2000, I finished writing it in 2009 in Westwood, 2010 maybe, and then it was printed in 2010, and in Yoredea, Shrashim Shoresh Chamishi, it's written in Magen Avot the following: that there's a big discussion in the Bet Yosef whether the Zohar says one thing and the Halacha says something else. What decides? Zohar against Halacha. So really, if it's Zohar against Gemara, we for sure go like the Gemara. Why? Because Zohar was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was also involved with the Tanaim, and they still weren't posek like that. So we follow the Gemara. The question is, when it's later poskim that's not written in the Gemara against the Zohar HaKadosh, then there's a whole discussion, and it's very possible that we go according to the Zohar HaKadosh. Not my subject. Not my subject over here. One of the classic examples the Bet Yosef has is getting an aliyah, and whether you have to be quiet or you read along with the Bal Koreh, that the Zohar says not to, and the Halacha says yes. That's where one of the conflicting points. Let me give you another conflicting. Okay, so that's the Zohar HaKadosh. So yes, let's say we follow the Zohar HaKadosh. That there's no question. But then you have the whole world of different mikubalim over the generations that said things. And I proved that in Morocco, we didn't follow a lot of those suggestions. And I'll give you a few of them. Number one, on Tisha B'Av. Shulchan Aruch says not to wear tefillin in the morning of Tisha B'Av. You go to Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim especially, the mikubalim wear tefillin. And Rav Ovadia Yosef encouraged those mikubalim, and he does it himself. Like the yeshiva of Bet El, that they wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av against the Shulchan Aruch. That's influence of Kabbalah. And we don't follow that. Another example is that many mikubalim say the bracha of Me'en Sheva, the bracha of Magen Avot Bidvaro Mechayim Etim B'Ma'amaro on Friday night, even if it falls out on the Leila Seder. So according to Halacha, you don't say. According to Kabbalah, you say. So that's another example that we followed the Halacha that we don't say. And the Ben Ish Chai says other Kabbalistic sources say to say. Over here, Rav Ovadia actually agrees with the Moroccan custom, is not to say. Okay. Furthermore, if you notice by the Tefillah of Shmona Esrei, the old Moroccan minyanim, who would do like what's written in the Shulchan Aruch, is that they would raise their voice a little bit, and during the Tefillah of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they would raise their voice a little bit so that everybody could follow along. According to Kabbalah, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be quiet. Those are a few examples just to start the ball game off. So I wrote from over here that it seems to be that the hashpa'ah of Kabbalah in Morocco wasn't as strong as in other Edut HaMizrach. And these are a few examples that I gave. A friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, I call him my pen pal because I never really met him in person, but we correspond a lot in writings. His name is Rabbi Yosef Peretz from Panama, Shlita, Talmid Chacham from Panama, and he writes the following, that he wrote this not long ago, during the Corona time. I didn't have a chance to respond. But he wrote the following, that you can't compare all the mikubalim in one pot and put them in one pot. There's two questions over here. The first question is, in Morocco, did we follow the psakim of the Arizal compared to the other Edut HaMizrach? And number two, is the other mikubalim that came after the Arizal, did we follow them? And regarding following the Kabbalah of the Arizal, there is no question that in Morocco, the Kabbalah of the Arizal was the acceptance of the Kabbalah of the Arizal was very strong. Thank you very much. What happened was that before the Arizal came along, there was the Kabbalah of all different Rabbanim, Maram Galitiya, and other Mikubalim, Kikatili, and other Mikubalim that were followed. And when the writings of the Arizal started to come to Morocco, they were followed religiously. There was a group of Mikubalim in Marrakesh. If you go to the cemetery till today, in the middle, they were buried in the middle of the cemetery. They were called the Mikubalim from Marrakesh, Rabbi Shlomo Amar and others. And they used to have a correspondence with the Rashash on different areas of Kabbalah. The Rashash was one of the great Mikubalim buried in Har HaZitim, who many of the Edut HaMizrach follow a lot of his hanagot. There, it seems to be in Morocco, we didn't follow the Rashash as much. Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzer also had significant arguments with the Rashash. There's a famous story that the Rashash came to Rabbi Masud Abu Chatzera, Rabbi Yaakov's son, in a dream and asked him, "Why doesn't your father follow my Kabbalah?" And there are significant differences. One of their famous cases is how to hold a Kiddush club, not the Kiddush club, slip of the tongue, how to hold the Kiddush cup. Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzera had held to hold it from the cup with your hand under, not like the Rashash. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyam bidbaro. Amen. All right, we spoke about Amen. Thank you. Okay, so there was the topic of not following the Rashash. Then there's the other topic of other Mikubalim throughout the generations, like the Yeshivat Bet El, that had their opinions. But following the Arizal, the Mikubalim always held of in Morocco. There's one of the most famous Sfarim written on the Zohar HaKadosh, is written the Migdash Melech. The Migdash Melech was authored by a group of Mikubalim, mostly centered in the city of Marrakesh in the 1600s. Rabbi Shlomo Buzagro put it out. Rabbi Avram ben Musa was one of the contributors, and there was four more other Rabbanim. One of Yosef Pinto, I think. There was four Rabbanim that were great Rabbanim in Marrakesh that they helped write the Migdash Melech. And you could see the influence of the Arizal all over there. So it's no question that the Arizal was a strong force. Also, one of the greatest Moroccan Rabbanim ever, Bi'akovi Ben Sur, in Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yaakov, Chelik Bet, Siman Kufchet and Kuftet, you could see about wearing the talit on Friday night. He has such a minhag about wearing the talit on Friday night. He brings the Arizal and he proves from the Arizal. So from here, Rabbi Peretz wrote to me that it would seem to be very clear that we followed the Arizal. Mm-hmm. What are the two classic cases that we follow the Kabbalah of the Arizal? First of all, it's not only the Moroccans. Ashkenazim also follow the Arizal because the Magen Avraham was one of the great deciders of Halacha for the whole world and especially for Ashkenazi Jewry. And the Magen Avram many times quotes the Arizal, Sefer Kavanot. He brings many times the Arizal. And we don't even know how many practices that we have that are like the Arizal, even against the Shulchan Aruch. I'll give you two of them. One of them is that we make brachot, birkat hashachar, every day, even though we're not obligated. For example, even if we don't hear the rooster, even if we don't hear the We don't get up. We don't bend ourselves. Zokef kifufim. We don't put on our leather shoes. You still make the brachot. Why? Because according to the Arizal, you make brachot even though you're not obligated. Shoes is something else, but that's not a good example. But for example, even if you don't hear the rooster, you still say Anoten nesech vibina leavchin ben yom v'layla. That's based on the Arizal. Because according to the Arizal said to say, that's how we follow. Another bracha is that Shulchan Aruch says not to make the bracha noten layev koach. And Rabbi Shalom Besas writes that in Meknes, that was the original minhag. But 90% of all the rest of Morocco, they say the bracha noten layev koach because they accepted the Arizal.
Yeah.
Another case is that how to wear your tefillin. There's a big debate in Morocco how to wear tefillin, but many chachamim push the halacha that you say that you sit down when you make the bracha tefillin of tefillin shel yad, and you stand up tefillin shel rosh. That also comes from the Arizal. So all these things are proofs how we followed the Arizal. Later minhagim that came from different mekubalim, we weren't necessarily attached to as much. For example, the tefillin on Tisha B'Av, that comes from Chasidei Bet El. Arizal doesn't talk about it. That's coming from Chasidei Bet El. Also, bracha me'en sheva. It's not something explicitly written in the Arizal. One example, I'll give you an example that I spoke about recently, which is what nusach do we say by the tefillot of Shabbat on Friday night, on Shabbat day, and Shabbat afternoon. So it's written in the it's written in the old Sidurim, and it's based on the Sher Knesset HaGedolah, that Friday night we say Ve'yanuchu ba, Shabbat morning Ve'yanuchu bo, and Shabbat afternoon Ve'yanuchu bam. Ba, bo, bam. Right? Ba, bo, bam. And the purpose to it, Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Tzur writes in Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yaakov, is that at night we are like a kala. We have the bechina of kala. The day we have the bechina of a chatan, and Shabbat afternoon we're already chatan v'kala together. So we say bam. And this is also written. So Rabbi Shlomo Dayan from Yerushalayim in Ateret Shlomo Siman Yud Bet has a teshuvah about this. He brings a sefer from Rabbi Nisim ben Adahan, who was one of the rabbanim in the city of Sueta. So you imagine, it's not far away from Melilla. And he writes over there in Sefer Maaseh Bereshit Chelek Bet, in the name of the Tosefet Shabbat, that this concept that at night we are considered a kala to Hashem, during the day we are a chatan, in the afternoon it's in relation to Shabbat. It says b'yom hashvish lo yeh kivan l'mashchan ela hachitan ekol b'chon yilatata b'yom hashvi talein v'chol chad v'chad yayiv mezoneh מיוצאים מזון, אילן ידע אני מצאים בתורה לשון נקבה, מחלליה מות יומת, כי כל עושה מלאכה, על כן תקנו לומר בה. He says that it's written the language of Shabbat in a female form, and that's why we were taken to say ba. And Shabbat is also in a language of Zachar, because it's written ki bo Shabbat mikol melachto, which is lashon Zachar. Therefore, we were taken to say bo. And Shabbat is also in a plural form, like it's written vet shabbatotai tishmoru. And that's why we were taken to say bam. So he also brings, reinforces this minhag. And you would think, okay, that's accepted. But you take a look. But you right? Oh, there could be. But you take a look now at the writings of Edot HaMizrach. Rav Ovadia Yosef and Chazon Ovadia has a arichut about this, and he says you should say V'yinuchu bo the whole time through. Why? Because they say in the name of the Rashash, to say V'yinuchu bo, which is interesting because the Chida himself reinforces our minhag to say ba bo bam. And the Chida was very close to the Rashash. And he never mentioned anything. He was in the same yeshiva, in Yeshivat Bet El, right? Famous story between him, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and the Rashash. And the Chida, nevertheless, didn't even quote the Rashash, but Edut HaMizrach, a lot of them side with saying Bo. Why do they side with saying both through all the tefillat? Because they say they found the Rashash used to say that in one of his sudurim. It's not clear, but that's what they follow in the Rashash. We weren't necessarily bound to that school of thought, which is one of the other examples that I'm showing you, that we kept our original minhagim, which were based on the Arizal in many places. Look at the sefer we've been learning together for the past couple of weeks, Arba Shomrim of Rabbi Rafael Moshe Elbaz. Now, granted, he was a big Hasid, big Mikubal, and he brings everything that they used to do according to the Arizal beyond Ikar Adin, beyond what we did. He says to do the Chalot and then the Hadassim on Friday night, which most places didn't do in Morocco, but that's because that's only for the higher levels or those who want to do the extra credit like the Arizal. But like the simple halachot that everybody else held like the Arizal, in Morocco also they held that way. So I agree to that point of Rav Yosef Peretz that he's bringing on the criticism on the Magen Avot. It's accepted, it's true. What I just want to emphasize is that there are discrepancies. There are certain chachamim will tell you no. We did just like we didn't do the bracha v'notanei of koach, and that could be a little bit different in different cities. It made a difference, but I think as a whole, the acceptance of that result was universal by Ashkenazim and Sephardi countries, and the acceptance of the Talmidim afterwards, not Talmidim of the Rashash and Chasidei Bet El and other Mekubalim. There it differs, which is why by the Kaddish right before Barichu in Morocco, we don't stand, because that's not written in the Arizal. It's written in the Sharet Shuvah to stand up for Barichu a little bit higher for the Barichu, but not for the Kaddish. The Kaddish evolved from different sources, not necessarily written in the writings of Chacham in Morocco that they didn't accept. So that's where if you understand this call, you'll be much more clear in the different paths of halacha, how the minhagim and how Chachmim Ma'arav followed. Zaku Baruch.